Embossing means when a powder is heated up and you get this lovely metallic look. As you can see, there's silver, gold, there's platinum, all sorts. This has helped me. I've got so many embossing powders, so it's helped me to actually do sheets with the colours on, so I know what colour it is when I go to my box with all the little pots in. Just to show you all the different types, there's a sparkly one, enchanted gold, there's a coloured one, green, there's a, I haven't got my glasses on there, I don't know what that one is, another green, there's a black, I very rarely use black, there's a silver there. My favourite is Wow embossing powder. It really is a good quality, and I actually buy big tubs. As you can see, I use it a lot. Because it's my favourite, we're going to use platinum, and I'm just going to show you on here. Can you see the platinum there where it's all shiny? Hopefully you can see that. I'm going to stick with one colour because I'm really explaining the technique of how to use. I'm really going to treat you as if you're a complete beginner and that you'll learn right from scratch how to do heat embossing. The next thing you'll need, and it's very important to have, it doesn't look much, but it's an anti-static bag, and this gets rid of any fingerprints, any grease or anything when you're working, so that the powder only sticks to where you've put the glues. So that is an important part of your kit. And to use a glue on your stamps, you need a slow drying glue. I use the Wow embossing pad. You can use the Versamark. They can get refills, so if they get dry, they take a long time to get dry, but they can get dry. But it must be a pigment ink that you use. You can use coloured ink pads as well, but they must be pigment. They've got to be slow drying so that when you put the powders on, it stays on. I'm going to talk about stamps, which stamps you use, because there's thousands out on the market. These are some old ones, and we used to always have them on wood. That was basically how they started. And you can get solid designs and you can get outlines. Solid means if I embossed all that, that's the whole thing would be in the embossed. If I embossed in that, it would just be the outline so I could colour in. So if I say a solid stamp, that's what I mean. And if I say an outline stamp, that's what I mean. And I'm going to use Julie Hickey's stamp here. It's very delicate outline, so I want you to see how beautiful it is when it's embossed. Now, because I use my stamps a lot and they do get dirty, you can wash them and then they do stick on your block. But because I use them a lot and they get less sticky, so always I do is, if I can find it, I put a bit of Pred stick on the back, just a little bit to help it adhere, because there's nothing worse when you're doing your stamping that it falls off. It should stay on that block, and it's very important to get a block that fits your stamp. The reason why you want a block to fit your stamp, I see a lot of people, they have something like some words to put on, they'll stick it on there and think that's okay, there's plenty of room. But what happens is, as you do it, it wobbles, and you don't want it to wobble because it will look smudged. So it's important to get one that actually fits so that you can just go down and up, but I'll explain that further on. Now, while we're on the subject of stamps, I'll go back to this wooden one. The wooden one, you don't obviously need a block because it's already got its own wooden block, but you can't take it on and off of there. You've also got the clings, which are like foam, and they're the same principle. You need a block and you would stick that, let's find one that fits. So you would stick that onto there and use the same. And again, if it doesn't stick, just either wash them or use your Pritt stick and stick it on. Now, just to let you know, in case I forget to tell you, if ever you wash your stamps, say for example, I washed that and dried it, then I went to emboss with the ink, with the pigment, the slightest bit of damp will stop it working. So your stamp needs to be bone dry, so it's better not to wash it just before you're about to start some work on it. I just want to talk about cardstock, because that's very important. I've discovered over the years that the cheaper the card, the less it is likely to be a good embossing image. It's worth whatever stock you've got having a try, just on a scrap bit, just to try. I very rarely stamp directly onto a card. Most of the time I do my embossing and then I cut it out and stick it on, and then if you've made any mistakes, you haven't wasted your card. If I'm stamping several images, I will do that over the whole card. If you're new to this, it's worth just stamping one image, putting the powder, heating, and then doing it as you go along. When you start getting more advanced and more impatient, as I am, you start stamping all over and doing big sheets. To collect the powder, all I've got is a little sheet of paper there, and I've got my Wow embossing pad ready, and I've got my stamp ready. It's quite a large one, that one. I've got my anti-static bag, and I've got my powder ready. Now, first of all, the reason why we put that fold there is because it's easier to tip it back, the excess powder back into the pot. Now, first of all, I'm going to show you about, I won't do it on my nice piece of card, I'm going to show you how to hold your stamps. Now, this is really important because you want a nice perfect line that is just the image of the stamp. If you wobble it, you'll get a shadow, and my rule is don't let it go. So what I tend to do is put the ink on it, then I stamp down, and then I press, but I'm still holding with one hand. If you're left-handed, do it that way. But if you let go and then go back, you're likely to smudge it. Also, if you hover over and take too long, sometimes you can actually touch the card and leave bits of pigment on the card. Now, the most important tool you'll need for embossing is a heat tool. Now, I've got Stampin' Up one. Over the years, I've had many different makes. Wow do a really good one. There's all different ones. But don't mistake it for a hairdryer. That is very intense heat. It can burn paint off. It would melt your skin. So it's always best to work away from your hands, which I'll show you in a minute. This one's nice. It's got 2 settings. And then also, I like the long ones simply because I find them easier to hold. So I usually hold with my left hand and use that to heat. They do take a while to warm up. They don't heat fast when you first use them. So what I tend to do is if I was doing a class, I would leave them running just for a few seconds, a few minutes maybe, just to get them warmed up. So just to show you, always remember, always have your bag near your embossing pigment, just so that you don't forget to do it. Because I've been touching this, my fingerprints, we've all got a certain amount of grease, some more than others. So if I put powder on there, it would actually stick. So I tend to do that just on the area around where I'm working. And I know that's the area I'm going to use. Now, on a smaller stamp, so I was doing words, I would just dab that ink on there very lightly. But because I'm using a large stamp, I'll pick my embossing ink up and just dab. I'm not really pressing hard because you just need it just on the surface. So I'm just literally dabbing it all over where I want it. And then I'm going to press down. And I'm not letting go, and I'm just going to press round, make sure it's all pressed down. Always find it standing up is easier than it is sitting down. You get the pressure on better. And then, let's just get rid of that hair. Then you've got a choice here. You can tip it out the pot, or you can actually use a scoop to scoop it out. But I tend to just use it with this. Now with this Tupperware pot, or whatever, what do you call these little pot here? Make sure it's got nothing in it. Oh, it's on the outside. I tend to run my anti-static bag in there just so the powder doesn't stick. So what I do is I tip it on. My card is just at a slight tilt, and I'm trying to keep it on so it goes onto the paper. And then I'm going to tap off, and you can be quite firm with it because it's going to stay where the glue is. Then I get my embossing powder, and you can either tip it into the back into the container or into your pot. Depends how much work you're doing, really. So on this occasion I'll stick it in there, and now I'm going to heat it. Now, looking on close inspection, when you want to make a mistake, you haven't. It's sod's law, really. If I didn't want to, I would. Oh, there is a little bit there. If there's any powder where I don't want it, you can just get a little bit of brush, because that would, if I touch that, that would all come off. So you just literally get a little brush and touch the area where there's powder that you don't want. And then I'm going to heat it. Now I'm going to hold my, I hope you can hear me, I'm going to hold my heat gun so I can just see that it's not touching the area. And you see it changing colour. I'm hoping you can see that. If your card starts to bend a little bit, you can always do it underneath. Depends how thick your card is. If your card's thick, then you need to do it on top. But if you do both, it tends to keep your card flatter. But you can always put your card afterwards underneath something heavy to flatten it back out again. I'm hoping you can see that. It's hard to see myself with the camera in the way. So I'm going to do it on top just so that I can see where I'm going. If you go too close, you can smudge your powder. If I miss a little bit, it never melts, so it will always be powder. So if I missed a little bit, it would rub off. So it's very important to try and catch everywhere. And if you sort of change your paper in the light, you can see where it's melted. It doesn't matter how many times I do this, I just love it. Whoever invented it, oh, thank you very much. I just adore the effect. It's so professional looking. Now I think I've got everywhere on that, and I hope you can see that. So now you can see I can colour in that, and it won't take on where it's embossed. So just to show you, I've got some pens here. They've got a nice end on them. And I'm just going to scribble a little bit on some acetate. I'm not going to do anything fantastic, just to show you how it can... Oh, I need some water. That helps. So, what I'll do is put a little bit of water. Say, for example, I want the pink. So I want this flower pink. You can just add that to there, and you can make it like a watercolour painting. You can add more colours to make it darker. As you can see, it's a nice effect, and it doesn't actually take on the embossing. So I could do that with all those colours. So now what I would do, I'd finish colouring that in, and you could either cut out all the way around your flowers, or cut an actual straight line round and then mount it on a card. mounting work's another lesson in itself. I just want to show you how a solid stamp looks when you do one that is completely blocked. So same principle, I've done my bag, do my ink, and just same thing, press down and then lift, and then put the powder on, make sure your paper's there, and just tap off, and you can see that's nice solid stamp. And then remember to get the powder back in your top. It's important to move the powder, because if you don't, you can end up with blowing it all away off your table. So I'm just going to heat that up, and the heat gun's cold. So it takes a bit longer, but you can see that going. There's a hair on there I missed, but that doesn't matter. I always say, if you want a perfect card, go to Marks and Spencer's. Handmade's always the best. So that's the difference. I cannot colour that in because it's all solid. So that's a solid stamp and that's an outline stamp. I'm going to show you here on my book. That's white embossing powder, so that's done with a clear with a white embossing powder. You can do it with white embossing ink and put white on top, or white embossing ink and put clear on top, but I usually use the colours. The only exception is the black, but I usually put the colour that I want on top. So that will be the white with clear embossing, and this one is clear embossing powder, clear embossing ink with white embossing powder. And the lovely thing is you can colour it in and flood it with colours, and it doesn't take on the white. And you can see it there as well. And the wording, I've done the same thing. And this one is a solid, and as you can see, that's a wording one, and that was done with clear embossing with a clear ink. So I've done the wow embossing ink and then put clear on top, and then it didn't hardly show until I put the colour in on the back. With this one, I want to show you doing triple embossing. So I'm going to do 3 colours on here. Now on this one, I'm going to use 3 colours. I've got platinum, I've got silver, and I've got copper colour. And this box here is where I make an accident and mix colours, and I'll show you how that can happen in a second. Now it's the same principle. I need to put my anti-static bag over, and because it's a large stamp, I'm going to just turn it over and put the ink on top. You've got plenty of time because it's slow drying. It takes its time to dry. Move those out of the way. Now I can see that's all coloured in. I can see actually that's not going to come out well. Just it's leaning on something, so it's pushed it down a bit, but that's fine for what I'm going to show you. So I'm going to place that down. So that's putting my glue on, if you like. And something I forgot to say earlier, that you really need a nice squidgy surface. If you did it on a hard surface, it doesn't stamp so well, so you want a nice squidgy surface. Now first of all, I'm going to add silver. So what I'm going to do is just do 1/3 of that. I've got my paper to catch. I'm going to do a stripe that way. And I'm going to tip that off. It's not stamped very well, but that's fine for what I'm showing you. And then I'm going to put that back in the pot. Then I'm going to get the platinum, another third, and it doesn't stick where the silver is. So tip that off and put that back in the pot. And then last of all is the platinum. Put that down and put that in the pot. And then I haven't made any mistakes, but what can happen is you could tip it in the wrong one, or when you're putting it on here you tip it the wrong way and it all covers. So wherever you first cover, your second layer has to fall over the first layer, and then the same with the third. It's really not stamped out very well. I think my ink pad might be drying out a little bit, but you can get the idea from this. As I said, there's not a very good stamp out on that one. I think my pad is a bit too dry, but even so, it's giving you the idea. And as you can see, there's 3 different colours on there. It's quite effective. Cut that out and put wording on there or a picture in front, whatever. It makes a nice background. And that's triple embossing. And I'm going to do the same thing with a different stamp. I've got a Julie Hickey background stamp here that's got words. I'm just going to show you a slightly different way of doing it. When you're doing your heat embossing, it's no good doing this, which I see a lot of people do, because what happens is the heat disperses to the side and it doesn't go anywhere. So a nice slow motion, backwards and forwards or in circles, and from underneath and on top. Not going too close, and also don't do it too long, because if you overcook it, it flattens the metals and it just looks dull. So it's just getting that bit where it heats and then move it on. I think you'll agree that's quite stunning with such little work. It's a beautiful background. It's a beautiful background stamp anyway. Julie's wording's really good. It's always comes out nice and clear. So I can rip the edge or I can cut it out, and that can have a birthday banner or a flower or whatever to attach to a card. So just to recap, you need embossing ink, which I'm using clear, embossing powder, which I use Wow, and my favourite is platinum, but they do many colours, a piece of paper that you fold to catch your ink, a nice thick wad of paper to stamp onto, you need your anti-static bag, very important, and you need your stamps, whether it be a solid one or an outline or whichever one you choose. So give it a go. Buy a small selection of things and give it a go. Oh, and the heat gun. I forgot the heat gun. Very important too. You can't do it with a hairdryer, so don't think you can get away with it. You can use a paint stripper, but watch you don't burn your paper or yourself. but this is the best thing to use.